Buddhism, the path of understanding. Prince Siddhattha renounced the life of the palace and entered the forest as a hermit seeking a solution to the problem of suffering. 6 years after entering, he came out a Buddha, ready to show others the path he had found so that they too could work out their deliverance. It was the experience of being bound to the perishable and unsatisfying that gave the impetus to the Buddha's original quest, and it was the certainty of having found the unperishing and perfectly complete that inspired the execution of his mission. Thence, the Buddha could sum up his teaching in the single phrase, "I teach only suffering and the cessation of suffering." But though the Buddha's teaching might be simple in its statement, the meaning behind the verbal formulation is profound and precise. The Buddha envisages suffering in its full range and essence rather than in its mere manifest forms. It is not just physical or mental pain that he means by suffering, but the recurrent revolution of the wheel of becoming, with its spokes of birth, aging, and death. Taking our immersion in a condition intrinsically inadequate as the starting point of his doctrine, he devotes the remainder to showing the way out of this condition. The solution the Buddha offers to the problem of suffering draws its cogency from the strict logic of causality. Suffering is neither an accident nor an imposition from without, but a contingent phenomenon arising through the force of conditions. It hangs upon a specific set of supports and is therefore susceptible to treatment by tackling the genetic structure which maintains it in being. By removing the conditions out of which it arises, it is possible to bring the whole phenomenon of suffering to an end. In order to reach the state of emancipation, it is of the first importance that the causal chain which originates suffering be snapped in the right place. Any proposed solution which does not remedy the problem of suffering at its source will eventually prove to be only a palliative, not a final cure. That the chain be broken in the right place requires an accurate determination of the interconnection of its links. The chain must be traced back to its most fundamental factor and cut off at that very point. Then suffering will no longer be able to arise. According to the Buddha's teaching, the primary link in the sequence of conditions generating suffering is ignorance, avijja. Ignorance is a primordial blindness to the true nature of phenomena. It is a lack of understanding of things as they really are. It functions as a mental obscuration cloaking our normal process of cognition and permeating our thought patterns with distortion and error. Among the various misconceptions produced by ignorance, the most basic is the apprehension of phenomena through the category of substantial existence. Phenomena are not isolated units locked up in themselves, but participants in an interconnected field of events. Their being derives from the entire system of relata to which they belong, not from some immutable core of identity intrinsic to themselves. Thence, they are devoid of an abiding essence. Their mode of being is insubstantial, relational, and interdependent. However, under the influence of ignorance, this essenceless nature of phenomena is not understood. It is blotted out by the basic unawareness, and as a consequence, phenomena present themselves to cognition in a mode different from their actual mode of being. They appear substantial, self-subsistent, and exclusivistic. The sphere where this illusion is most immediately felt is the sphere where it is most accessible to us, namely, our own experience. The experiential domain is reflectively divisible into two sectors, a cognizing or subjective sector made up of consciousness and its adjuncts, and a cognized or objective sector made up of the cognitive data. Though the two sectors are interlocking and mutually dependent, through the operation of ignorance they are conceptually bifurcated and reduced to an adventitious subject-object confrontation. On the one side, the cognizing sector is split off from the experiential complex and conceived as a subject distinct from the cognitive act itself. The objective sector in turn congeals into a world of external things pointing to the subject as its field of action and concern. Consciousness awakens to itself as a persisting ego standing up against the world as an other, perpetually estranged from itself. Thence it commences its long career of conquest, control, and domination in order to justify its own suspect claim to a self-subsistent mode of being. This cognitive error with its consequent solidification of the ego is the source of the afflictions, kilesa, which hold us in subjection to suffering. The lurking suspicion that the mode of being we credit to ourselves may be unfounded arouses an inner disquietude, a chronic anxiety compelling a drive to fortify the sense of egoity and give it solid ground on which to stand. We need to establish our existence to ourselves, to give inner confirmation to our conception of personal substantiality, and this need occasions the ordering of the psychic life around the focal point of ego. The bid for self-confirmation makes its impact felt on both the emotional and intellectual fronts. The dominion of the ego in the emotional sphere appears most conspicuously in the weight of the unwholesome roots, greed, hatred, and delusion, as determinants of conduct. Because the ego is essentially a vacuum, the illusion of egohood generates a nagging sense of insufficiency. We feel oppressed by an aching incompleteness, an inner lack requiring constantly to be filled. The result is greed, a relentless drive to reach out and devour whatever we can, of pleasure, wealth, power, and fame, in a never-successful attempt to bring the discomfort fully to an end. When our drive to satisfaction meets with frustration, we react with hatred, the urge to destroy the obstacle between our desire and its satisfaction. If the obstructions to our satisfaction prove too powerful for the tactics of aggression, a third strategy will be used: dullness or delusion, an attitude of deliberate unawareness adopted as a shell to hide our vulnerability to pain. On the intellectual front, the ego illusion engenders a move by reason to establish on logical grounds the existence of a substantial self. The idea "I am" is a spontaneous notion born of ignorance, the basic unawareness of the egoless nature of phenomena. By accepting this idea at its face value, as pointing to a real I, and by attempting to fill in the reference, we develop a view of self, a belief confirming the existence of a self and giving it an identity in the framework of our psychophysical constitution. The theories which emerge invariably fall into one or another of the two metaphysical extremes, either eternalism, when we assume the self to enjoy eternal existence after death, or annihilationism, when we assume the self to be extinguished at death. Neither doctrine can be established on absolutely compelling grounds, for both are rounded on a common error: the assumption of a self as an enduring substantial entity. Because the pivot of our cognitive adherences and their emotional ramifications is the notion of an ego, a powerful current of psychic energy comes to be invested in our interpretive schemes. And because the notion of an ego is in actuality groundless, the product of a fundamental misconception, this investment of energy brings only disappointment in the end. We cling to things in the hope that they will be permanent, satisfying, and substantial, and they turn out to be impermanent, unsatisfying, and insubstantial. We seek to impose our will upon the order of events, and we find that events obey a law of their own, insubordinate to our urge towards control. The result of our clinging is eventual suffering. Yet this suffering, which arises from the breakdown of our egocentric attempts at dominance and manipulation, is not entirely negative in value. It contains a tremendous positive value, a vast potential, For by shattering our presumptions, it serves to awaken our basic intelligence and set us on the quest for liberation. It forces us to discover the ultimate futility of our drive to structure the world from the standpoint of the ego, and makes us recognize the need to acquire a new perspective free from the compulsive patterns which keep us tied to suffering. Since the most fundamental factor in the bondage of the ego is ignorance, to reach this new perspective, ignorance must be eliminated. To eliminate ignorance, it is not sufficient merely to observe rules of conduct, to generate faith, devotion, and virtue, or even to develop a calm and concentrated mind. All these are requisites, to be sure, essential and powerful aids along the path, but even in unison they are not enough. Something more is required, some other element that alone can ensure the complete severing of the conditional nexus, sustaining the round of samsaric suffering. That something more is understanding. The path to liberation is essentially a path of understanding. Its core is the knowledge and vision of things as they really are. It is for one who knows and sees that the destruction of the defilements takes place, not for one who does not know and does not see. The objective domain where understanding is to be aroused is our own experience. Since our distorted interpretations of our experience provide the food which nourishes the process of ego, it is here, in experience, that the ego illusion must be dispelled. Our own experience is, of all things, that which is closest to ourselves, for it is through this that everything else is registered and known. And yet, though so close, our own experience is at the same time shrouded in darkness, its true characteristics hidden from our awareness by the screen of ignorance. The Buddha's teaching is the key which helps us to correct our understanding, enabling us to see things as they are. It is the light which dispels the darkness of ignorance, so that we can understand our own understanding of things, just as a man with eyes might see forms illuminated by a lamp. The correct understanding of experience takes place in the context of meditation. It requires the development of insight, vipassana, based on a foundation of meditative calm, samatha. No amount of merely intellectual knowledge can replace the need for personal realization, because our tendency to misconceive phenomena persists through a blindness to their true nature. Only the elimination of this blindness through direct vision can rectify our erroneous patterns of cognition. The practice of Buddhist meditation is not a way of dissolving our sense of individual identity in some undifferentiated absolute, or of withdrawing into the bliss of a self-contained interiority. It is, rather, a way of understanding the nature of things through the portal where that nature is most accessible to ourselves, namely, our own processes of body and of mind. The practice of meditation has profound effects upon our sense of identity. The alterations it produces, however, do not come about by subordinating the intelligence to some uncritically accepted generalization, but through a detached, sober, and exhaustive scrutiny of the experiential field that provides the locus for our sense of identity. The focal method of the practice of meditation is reflective awareness, a bending back of the beam of awareness upon itself in order to illuminate the true characteristics of existence implicated in each occasion of cognition. The path of understanding unfolds in 3 successive stages called the 3 full understandings. In the first stage, the full understanding of the known, nata parinya, the domain of experience is broken down by meditative analysis into its constituting factors, which are then carefully defined in terms of their salient qualities and functions. The categories employed in this operation are the key terms in the Buddhist analysis of personality: the aggregates, khandha, sense bases, ayatana, and elements, dhatu. The purpose of this dissection is to dispel the illusion of substantiality that hovers over our gross perception of our experience. By revealing that what common sense takes to be a solid monolithic whole is in reality a conglomeration of discrete factors, the contemplation deprives the sense of self-identification of its chief support, the notion of the ego as a simple unity. The factors which emerge from this analytical investigation are then correlated with their causes and conditions, disclosing their contingency and lack of independence. The second stage of understanding is the full understanding of scrutinization, tiranaparigna. At this stage, the experiential field is examined, not as before in terms of its individuating features, but by way of its universal marks. These universal marks are three: impermanence, anicca, suffering, dukkha, and non-self, anatta. Under the limitations of ordinary cognition, phenomena are apprehended as permanent, pleasurable, and self. In the contemplative situation, these assumptions must be corrected, replaced by the perception of phenomena as impermanent, unpleasurable, and non-self. The task of the meditative process at this level is to ascribe these qualities to the material and mental processes, and to attempt to view all phenomena in their light. When the second stage is fully mature, it gives way gradually to the third type of comprehension, the full understanding of abandonment, pahanaparigna. Here the momentary insights achieved at the previous level blossom into full penetrations. Impermanence, suffering, and selflessness are no longer merely understood as qualities of phenomena, but are seen with complete clarity as the nature of phenomena themselves. These realizations bring about the final abandonment of the deluded perceptions, as well as the destruction of the ego-tainted emotions which cluster around them. To walk the path of understanding is to begin to see through the deceptions which have held our imaginations captive through the long stretch of beginningless time. It is to outgrow our passions and prejudices, and to cast off the mask of false identities we are accustomed to assume, the vast array of identities that constitute our wandering in samsaric existence. The path is not an easy one, but calls for great effort and personal integrity. Its reward lies in the happiness of growing freedom which accompanies each courageous step, and the ultimate emancipation which lies at the end.